Welcome to a new episode of the VSP Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony. Today I'm going to go over my journey as a strength and conditioning coach. I find, almost every strength coach I know around the world has a pretty interesting story of, how they got to where they are. So I'm going to go over mine and maybe it will help you out. So let's jump in. I was a naive 18-year-old kid who loved to work out, and I fell in love with CrossFit. My buddy Kevin and I, shout out Kevin at Locomotion in Huntington, we got into lifting together, and fortunately we both enjoyed the movement behind it. We like to work out hard and we push ourselves, and that came with a lot of injuries, of course, as we both know. We probably are still paying for it to today. But we really wanted to learn the why behind, how to, actually make progress. What went into, improving mobility, strength, range of motion, pain-free movement. We did our snatches, gymnastics work, obviously all the strength and the conditioning that comes with CrossFit. And it taught me a lot, right? CrossFit has a bad rap for the most part, but it allows you to be exposed to a lot of different stimuli, right? From all the strength work to the Olympic work that is applicable to, almost any program that you're going to come along. So, I thank CrossFit for that. And as I was trying to figure out what I want to do, which I went to, Farmingdale, I played lacrosse there. And then I transferred over to Stony Brook University and quickly jumped into an internship there. I was working at actually it was a PTI, which was a personal training institute. I don't even think they exist anymore. It was all Nautilus machines. It was funny, like what I do now, which is pretty much all free weights, was completely, it was the opposite. I actually still have a client that I train now. Her name is Kelly. Shout out Kelly. Who's stuck with me for the past 10 plus years. She trained with me, and we would after hours where the boss wasn't around, we would do some free weight stuff and some different boxing stuff that was, against the protocol PTI. And there's reasons why PTI doesn't exist anymore. But then I started my internship at Stony Brook, as a strength and conditioning coach, and worked with all the athletes. And at the same time, I was also doing personal training. I was training mostly Gen Pop, like many people, who get into this industry do. Moms and dads. I was just working with people who had back pain, shoulder pain. Maybe they were, jogging and running marathons and races and playing golf and that type of stuff. But it wasn't anything too serious. And slowly but surely, right, it all started with the Gross family. Shout out to the Grosses. I started training this kid, Caleb, who was a little seventh grader. He was in good shape and whatnot. And he really liked to work out. And I loved working with him because he was an athlete. And I was working with Stony Brook as an intern there, all their teams. And I was hungry just to train athletes. And that one athlete, Caleb, then it was his friend Kyle and Luca, this other kid, Kyle, and Vinny. And one thing led to another. And I had all these athletes, right? We had the Garsides, who still train with us today. This little kid, Dennis Harrington, who's now taller than me. So there was this, this small group that quickly grew and grew and grew. And I loved working in the collegiate sector. Working in Stony Brook, it taught me a lot. I was an intern for Dave Van Dyke, who's at Rutgers now. This guy, Bill. I had other GAs, like Vinny, who I still keep in touch with, this guy, GC. Really good coaches, that, not even just from a programming and cueing standpoint, but more from a mentality. What does it really take to be a strength and conditioning coach? Because I never was, I played at Farmingdale for lacrosse. We didn't have a strength and conditioning coach. We did all of our lifting on our own. So I never was in that environment. So it was all very new to me, but it gave me that framework of, all right, how do I, communicate? How do I get buy-in, from all these athletes where, if you're in this industry, not everybody wants to lift. Not everybody enjoys, the grind of it all. So you have to figure out a way, all right, I need to get these kids to buy in. So Stony Brook really gave me that. It gave me that framework. It helped me build a little bit of a network. Although I wish, in a way, I stayed involved in the collegiate sector, I just saw a little bit more of a future for myself in the private sector, just because these kids, the kids in the private side for me, it grew and grew and grew and grew. And then, I came to a point, because I was working at a place called, LIFW, and I went to the guy, Mike, who I still keep in touch with. He's still very much involved with VSP today. And I was like, I'm I think I'm going to go off on my own. I'm going to go try to find a building. And for those of you who know Long Island real estate, it's not easy. But, I was going to do it. I was going to, I had some money from my grandfather who passed away, left me a little bit of money. And I was going to take that and try to open something up. But Mike, he said, hey, why don't you open up VSP and share the space here? And I was like, I think that would be an easy and easy transition, a great idea. It would be, low risk. I was 22 at the time. Something to get my feet wet and make sure that this is what I really wanted to do. And I did. And, those original 12 athletes, I call them, turned to 30. And someone who I have to give a little bit of credit to is Pete and Eric Cressy, with the semi-private model. I was training most of people one-on-one, and I barely had any time. And I knew in order to really make this a business, I needed to maximize my time. So that's where I took on the semi-private, a 1-to-3, 1-to-4, 1-to-5 ratio at most. And I started bringing like an assistant coach. This guy DJ, this guy Joe Kennedy, my childhood best friend Kyle, who's a father now. Shout out Kyle. And the team slowly grew. And the 12 athletes turned to 30, to 40, to 50. Next thing I knew it, I'm in about a year in, and I got 100 athletes. I couldn't be any more happy. And it really just stemmed from quality coaching. I knew almost nothing about social media, marketing, a website, or anything like that. I barely had any sort of digital footprint. We just did a great job with the word of mouth. It always, like the one thing, and I still do it today, and I try to do it as much as I possibly can, but obviously time is limited, is go to games. Be there for the athletes. Really let them know that you care. And show up when it matters. I think that went a really, really long way for us and still does to this day. And that's why we continue to grow, right? When we check off on our marketing sheet and, in our system, where they come from, 9 out of 10 times it's from a friend. It's from a teammate. It's something along those lines. Of course, we get a lot from Instagram and Google and whatnot, but it's mostly through that organic reach, which I think is the most powerful thing in this business. But anyways, like I said, like we grew and grew and grew, and we were at that 40, we were in 4,200 square feet. And we, there was an adult program going on there and an athlete program. So as you can imagine, it was pretty tight. It wasn't conducive, for sports performance. The facility was really built to be more of like a boutique style. We'd knock down walls, we had to lay down turf once, and then we had to lay down turf again and connect it. So it wasn't really what I wanted to be, but it taught us how to, really get good in a small space, which I think is really important, and most strength coaches would say the same thing. But it allowed us to grow at a pace that was realistic and smart, for us. And during COVID, right after COVID, that's where we kind of like took a nice big jump. That 100 plus athletes turned to 200 plus athletes. And, in 4,200 square feet with only, a finite amount of time, we had to figure out what we were going to do. I thought 2021, when I started looking for a space, it was going to come like that, but I was very, very wrong. It actually took, 3-4 years really to find a good space. And I had a really good broker, shout out Todd, a lot of shout outs today, who, helped guide me, in this process. And it took some time. It took some negotiating and figuring things out. And fortunately, now we went from 4,200 square feet to an 11,000 square foot space. And that all was from the lessons I learned over time. Building my network, leaning on people who knew more than me. I talk about that a lot with my staff is, I want to continue to surround myself with people who know more in different, sectors, right? It's really important because that's how you're going to learn. I don't need to be, the smartest guy in the room. I want to help, build people up and guide them and navigate this whole, small business world, which is, it could be a challenge. So, it continues to be and always will be about the team. Now we're here, and now we got to continue to grow. There was a lot that's happened, between then and now, and I'm excited, to continue to learn from all my mistakes because we had a lot of mistakes. But the future is bright. We have a lot of plans to expand. into a second and potentially a third facility on Long Island. And definitely expand our digital footprint. With the online training, there's a lot of opportunity out there for us. And I have a couple of pieces of advice for people that are looking to get into this industry. Because everybody wants to own a gym. It sounds fun. It is fun, but it takes a lot of work. So number one is you're a business owner first. You have to put aside the coaching hat a lot. And I hate it, right? I hate being in the office, or the kids would say, "Oh, Anthony, you're in your lair." They'd make jokes because they know that I'm in my office working. But really, you have to know how to separate those two, because it's. I know that the coaching is what got you here, but if you don't take the business side seriously enough, you are going to quickly find yourself not a business owner anymore. Because it's not easy, and money is real, and you got to make sure you pay your bills and things like that, and the people that are working for you. So make sure that you prioritize, learning about business, just as much as the coaching side. And I learned a lot from EOS, which is Traction, Gino Wickman. It's simple, really simple formula. Simple framework that he's put together. It made my life a lot easier and allowed me to build some systems and put the right people in the right place. At least for the time being, to help set me up, as a business. So that's number one, is really prioritize that business first. Number two, and this kind of goes side by side, and everyone says you can't do it by yourself. You got to put together a team. I can't be the owner, the lead coach, the marketer, the nutritionist, the facility maintenance guy, the accountant, so on and so forth, right? You can't do it all, right? You have to see what are you really good at? And even if you're really good at it, what can you delegate, and build your team around that. People want opportunity. People like to be given, that chance to succeed and improve themselves. But you got to surround yourself with the right people. For me, there's three, intangibles, I guess. It's, is awareness, people being aware of, the space and respecting it, the people inside of it. Being a motivator, you have to be able to energize these athletes and these adults, because not everyone feels good coming in day to day. And then confidence, not being afraid to speak up, have hard conversations, direct people, create a better narrative, for the overall facility. All those three things really matter to me, and that's typically how I hire, because I'm a big believer in you can kind of teach anybody, how to cue or identify issues and assessments and programming and everything like that. But some of these intangibles you really can't teach. So again, you're a business owner first. Make sure you surround yourself with the right people. And three is you can't play scared. And this goes with almost anything in this industry is, if you really want to be good at something, you can't be scared to get after it. You got to have some really good work ethic. You got to work all the time, and my wife would, probably say the same thing. Is you got to be in it, right? It's a day, it's a morning, it's an afternoon, and a night activity, right? Is being a business owner. I love this gym. It's a dream come true. Sometimes I still look around and I'm like, I can't believe I own it. And I'm just really, really excited for the future. So, if you ever have any questions, if you're somebody who's a prospective coach or business owner and wants to get into this field, I'm always happy to chat. Shoot me a DM at Anthony Bernice on Instagram, or my email is right online. And I'm happy just to chat and give you some advice, or just be an ear for you. So appreciate you, tuning in. This is a little bit about my story. And I would love to hear about you one day. So take care, guys.